arriving, and do a little bit of meditation on sound, just letting the sound of the gong draw you back to it and draw you into it more and more, okay? So that is so simple. We really are letting the sound, the experience of sound, draw us into meditation. So the instruction was not, okay, try hard to figure out how to meditate now by relating yourself to this sound. That was not my instruction. All I said was just let the sound do it. Let the sound draw you back to it. When your mind wanders, let the sound draw you into it more and more. Let the sound do what needs to be done. And in that way, we already have an underlying capacity to be drawn into more of a sense of wholeness, unity, simplicity, groundedness. I could see it on your faces, many of you. Just like that, just letting the sound draw us in. So we're not trying to do something. We're just learning how to let things be done by the natural power of things. And that's also what we're doing with a caring moment or recalling a benefactor. Just when we recall a moment of connection or a benefactor as present to us that makes us happy to recall, it's already starting to evoke our underlying capacity to be happy, connected, feel what care feels like. If it's a caring moment that makes us happy to recall, that is just upon remembering it. I'm seeing a dog on a couch now, so for me, this is automatically a caring moment. Just to see a dog on a couch, that's it, I'm gone. Loving qualities all over the place. Also, it's a very lovable looking dog, I have to say. Anyhow, if it's a moment that makes you happy to recall, or thinking of that person, that benefactor, feels uplifting, it's already evoking your underlying capacity to feel connected. It's very much like the sound meditation. We don't have to do a lot. We just let our underlying capacity be drawn out by a way that works well for us. Just like letting the sound itself draw us into unity with it. Not us trying to figure out how we're going to relate to the sound, not that. So this practice with a field of care, or ways of becoming more deeply receptive to love and compassion that we've been exploring, are just like that. learning how to let the natural power of things bring out our own underlying capacity, and then just cooperating with that, letting that emerge, settling into that more and more. So in the meditation instruction that has been introduced this past 2 weeks, we employ the field of care framework to evoke loving capacities from our underlying awareness, to just bring them out. And once loving energies and qualities are being experienced, then they become our focus. Letting those loving energies or qualities, or if the word loving is too strong or not quite what works for you, it doesn't have to be explicitly loving. It's a sense of connection, warmth, acceptance, feeling at home. So once, that's what I mean by loving energies and so forth. So when those loving energies and qualities are being experienced, they become our focus, not the field of care framework. By letting those loving energies and qualities permeate all aspects of our being, our body, our feelings, our emotions. So we don't ruminate about the field of care, whether it's caring enough or not. Our focus is on just steeping in the loving qualities. Okay, so far? That's the instruction, anyway. Now, the thing is that parts of us will probably arise at some point in the meditation. And by part of us, again, what I mean is a sense of self with familiar patterns of thought and feeling. So when a part of us like that arises, a part of us may arise that's drawing our attention elsewhere, away from just steeping in those loving qualities. And pretty much, I think you all agreed that was happening last night. So for example, some controlling part of us may come up that wants to take control of it all and think of other things. Or a doubting part comes up while we're meditating that thinks of reasons not to trust any field of care. Or a self-critical part comes up that thinks I do not deserve care, and so forth. So you're all following me? What I mean by a part of us will likely come up at some point that's doing that kind of thing. So these protective parts of us are trying to help us. They think that the loving qualities that we are experiencing in the meditation are coming from outside of us, from others. So these parts of us try to protect us by preventing us from accepting love from others who may not be reliable. Are you following? That's what they're doing. In a sense, these parts of us are a little afraid of love because they're very ambivalent about the source of this love we're experiencing, and they think love only comes from outside of us. So they think, I don't think I can fully trust where this is coming from, so I'm going to shut this down. That's what I mean by these protective parts of us are trying to help us. Are you following what I'm saying? They're trying to protect us from becoming too vulnerable. But actually, every aspect of the meditation, the field of care, the caring figures in it, the energies, the loving qualities that we're experiencing are all aspects of our own awareness. They're all aspects of our awareness. And these protective parts of us do not know that yet. So we need to help these parts of us learn that the loving qualities they're experiencing in the meditation are coming out of our own underlying awareness, which is a completely reliable source of love, not from an external world that may not be reliable. You following? We need to help these parts learn that the loving qualities they're experiencing can be trusted because the source of those qualities is trustworthy, It's our own fundamental awareness. It's not someone else who might let them down or hurt them. It's our own awareness. But we need to help these parts of us learn that. They can trust these qualities. They can trust love because they can trust its source in the depth of our own awareness, our own being. So we're going to do the meditation again briefly, which is meditation 2 in your handout, deepening our receptivity to love and compassion. And we're going, by engaging all 3 principles of this receptive mode of practice, which I mentioned last night. And those 3 principles are accessing, noticing, and including. So we use the field of care, your best caring moment, makes you happy to recall, or a benefactor that you feel is present to you and uplifting to be with. So we'll use that field of care to access the loving qualities. And then we'll notice parts of us and feelings that start to draw our attention away from those loving qualities. Noticing parts of us and the feelings. And then thirdly, we'll let all those feelings and parts of us be gently included in the spacious warmth and acceptance and care of those loving qualities. Accessing loving qualities, noticing parts of us and feelings that come up that draw our attention away from those qualities, and then including those parts of us and their feelings in the spacious acceptance and warmth and care of those qualities. Accessing, noticing, including. Is that kind of clear enough? That's what we're going to do. So any thoughts and feelings that arise can feel deeply accepted, gently welcomed, at home in this process. So these patterns of thought and feeling can begin to relax, have the space that they need to find their own way of being here, can begin to settle, begin to heal. So in this way, we are helping these parts of us and their feelings sense that the source of the loving qualities, which is the depth of our awareness, is completely reliable, trustworthy, and actually inexhaustible, beyond burning out, beyond compassion fatigue. But we can't get to that place beyond burning out, beyond compassion fatigue, unless we become much more receptive to the source of the compassion that's beyond fatigue in the depth of our awareness. And so this is the direction that we're going in. We have to become more deeply receptive to get what we want by taking a course like this, which was the title of the course, establishing a secure core of compassion and awareness that we can return to, be replenished in, come from, in being present to others. So let's begin. Let's do this meditation again, becoming more deeply receptive to love and compassion. It's meditation 2 in your handout. And we just begin with a little abdominal breathing. We'll do it more briefly tonight so we can get to your questions. And just inhale gently into the abdomen so it expands. Feel it expand as you inhale. And then just let your breath be in its own natural rhythm in that way. Feeling your abdomen expand and contract with each breath. Now bring to mind your field of care, that is, your caring moment that makes you happy to recall, or presence of your benefactor. It's uplifting to be with. Really bring this into your mind, not just as an abstraction or a distant memory, but as happening right now. And feel what it feels like to be in that moment or with that benefactor. Really happening here, now. Don't mess around with this. Feel it happening now. You are being seen as deeply worthy of love and care beyond judgments. And just relax into the feeling of this care, steeping in its loving energy and tender qualities, and letting them infuse your whole being. If you still feel a little disconnected, just imagine that this is happening. And accept this loving energy and its tender qualities into your whole body. And every layer of feeling and emotion. Every part of you loved in its very being. Just accepting it, steeping in it, allowing this. Settling into it more and more and allowing more and more of you to feel this. More parts of your body, more layers of feeling. Now, if part of you is having difficulty with this practice, drawing your attention elsewhere, and without trying to change that part of you in any way, just become aware of it and what it's feeling in a completely accepting way, spaciously allowing it to be here. Letting it have the space here that it needs to relax or find its own place in this compassionate space and settle in its own way. Just let any feeling or any part of you have all the space it needs. In the spacious warmth and acceptance of this field of care. And now just relax into the feeling, this feeling of warmth or acceptance or love, however it is for you, and let this help your heart and mind to just trust, release all of its frameworks, and just let your heart and mind become gently, completely open, totally open, like space. Let all the patterns of thought and feeling that arise just unwind or release within this total openness of awareness. By just letting everything be. And thank you. So in the last phase of the meditation, as you can see on your handout, it's called releasing phase. And in that last releasing phase, we just let go of the whole framework of that field of care. The way this works is just as it's instructed, as various parts of us or feelings sense the deep safety here, the deep safety of this unconditional acceptance. And these feelings and parts of us can begin to trust the source of those loving qualities in the depth of our awareness. And as trust deepens with repetition of practice over time, the mind can become more willing to release its self-clinging grip on itself and settle into the basic openness and clarity and warmth in the depth of its awareness. So that's what we're doing in the releasing phase, letting the spacious warmth, acceptance, the loving qualities of this experience help the mind learn to trust the source of the qualities, which means letting go of its narrow, kind of constricting, self-clinging frameworks, which it grasps to because it's afraid not to. But within this spacious warmth and acceptance of these loving qualities, the mind can begin to sense that there's something deeply trustworthy here, that it can trust enough to let go of that grip on itself. Relax the grip. Let go even of the framework of field of care or anything in particular. And just settle into the basic openness and clarity and warmth in the depth of the mind's own awareness. And that's the direction that the releasing phase takes us. And that's already the beginning of what's called the deepening mode of this compassion training. So we've been focusing on the receptive mode, increasing our receptivity to powers of love and compassion. The releasing phase of that very practice is actually the beginning of the deepening mode, settling into the depth of our awareness, the basic openness and clarity and simplicity of it. So a whole bunch of really good questions came in that I want to get to. And always, I'm sure on Fridays, at least certainly tonight, I will not be able to get to. My friend Ilona went through them all and selected what seemed to be especially questions that maybe many other people would have. And then I'll try to respond to as many as possible, okay? So one person asks, if someone is doing a traditional kind of meditation of metta or karuna, love or compassion, using phrases like, may I be happy, and may I be safe, may I be peaceful, and so forth. And if feelings of love and care arise from that, would this bring the same benefits as the practice that we're engaging here? Or is there something special about this kind of relational meditation with a caring moment or a benefactor? Does everybody understand the question? So what I would say is what's special about what we're doing is the experience of being seen in a moment of caring connection or together with a benefactor present to us. We are being seen in our dignity. We're being seen as someone deeply worthy of love and care and compassion. So that empowers us to sense our depth, to begin to trust it, to settle into that, settle into the depth of our being, settle into the depth in us from which comes powers and energies of love and compassion and care and responsiveness and courage and so forth. We have a deep dignity and a depth to us. But the experience of being seen, of that in us being seen by someone else, is needed by us as human beings for us to recognize that depth and that dignity in ourselves. So the relational framework of the practice gives us that experience of being seen. And as we are seen in our own depth and learn to connect to our own depth through the practice, then from there we can also relate to others in their depth and recognize they have a depth. So this framework that we're entering into, actually, in terms of Buddhist traditions, it comes from practices of what are called Buddhanusmrti, that is, recollecting the Buddha, bringing the Buddha to mind as a spiritual benefactor, and experiencing yourself as seen by the Buddha and held in the unconditional love and compassion and wisdom of the Buddha. You following what I'm saying? That's a practice of refuge in the whole history of Buddhist traditions. And the sense of being seen and held in that way is then enacted through ritual and meditative practices, and is at the very heart of empowerment rituals and rituals of offering and blessing and purification within the various Buddhist traditions. So the relational framework that we're bringing to mind here is patterned on that kind of a relational framework. And indeed, the practices of metta and karuna, what was called traditional practices, have been done in the history of Buddhist traditions with that background and foundation assumed. Those practices did not begin in Asian Buddhism with a sense that you are a separate, isolated, autonomous self who is going to begin practicing by making good wishes for yourself. That's not where anything began in Asian Buddhism. It began with the recognition that you are already seen and held in all the qualities of enlightenment by the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And that empowerment of being seen and held in that way empowers you to then enter into those very practices of metta, karuna, and so forth, making good wishes for yourself, others in widening circles, with the foundation, with the secure base of being held, being seen. That's assumed in all Buddhist traditions. For some reason, when Buddhist practice came into the West, a lot of that was deleted, what I just summarized, that's actually the history of Buddhism. It's not just Buddhism, it's also in all other spiritual traditions I'm aware of, where there's a cultivation of increasingly unconditional and inclusive love and compassion. There's a similar relational pattern where practice begins, being seen and held in the awareness of God, or of the saints who reflect God's love and compassion to us, or being seen and held in the compassion of your ancestors. That is where things have begun in the history of all these spiritual traditions. So actually, it's just to say that what we're doing here is actually very traditional, except it's also adapted. So each of us can find access to this relational pattern within our own life in a way that could be effective for us, which certainly can include spiritual benefactors like the Buddha or your spiritual ancestors. Next question is, you mentioned a Tibetan tradition that you draw from. Could you tell us what it is? So sure, the patterns that I just described are coming from Tibetan Buddhism in general across the board. And that kind of relational pattern, as I just said, is also shared with other spiritual traditions. But the particular Tibetan traditions that are my own main traditions and which I therefore draw from most are three, actually. Sorry, it's so many, but Nyingma Dzogchen is my primary tradition. A supportive tradition is Kagyu Mahamudra. And a third supportive tradition, well, you could say a second supportive tradition is Geluk Lojong. For those who have background in Tibetan Buddhism, then you can recognize those terms. So Nyingma, Kagyu, and Geluk. Nyingma is my primary tradition, but I also draw on Kagyu and Geluk for support. Third question. I found it helpful, as you suggest, to recall a person from my past who made me feel cared for. But if the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have totally unconditional love and compassion for all of us, all beings, wouldn't it be appropriate to take them as benefactors in this practice? So yes, yes, that would be very appropriate. And indeed, the practice is modeled on the ways that people have taken the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas as benefactors through the ages in this kind of way, really bringing them to mind. They're very real. They're here. You are actually being held in their qualities of love and compassion. You are being seen in your deep dignity and your profound potential, and in all the impediments in you that are impeding it, to the depth of your being seen in that way. That is the practice. And that can be very powerful if you feel that sense of connection. In other words, if that makes deep sense to you and is connecting for you, then absolutely I would encourage you to do that, because you can feel the power of that. That field of care is experienced as so totally unconditional and reliable and powerful and indomitable that it brings out those qualities from our underlying awareness, and that is how it has functioned. Qualities of unconditionality and groundedness and indomitability and courage are being evoked in us from our basic awareness. So it's a tremendously powerful practice. Indeed, that is the very practice that I'm modeling this on. But the problem is that many, many people in our context, in our time, cannot relate to that, at least not as their starting point. They cannot relate to that. So something has to be done to help people begin to access these life-giving qualities and powers of life in ways that can really work for them. It's for that reason that I and then other teachers I teach with together have adapted traditional forms of practice into forms that could be, there are different options for the individual to find their way of connecting to these principles, to actually accessing it. Are you following what I'm saying? So all that's actually related to that question. Someone says, in these receptive mode meditations, that's what we've been doing, I experience the loving qualities, but then strong feelings come up of intense concern for those in marginalized groups who are suffering the most in this pandemic. Even feelings of rage come up about the marginalized groups who are on the edges of society and therefore the first to suffer, the first to die. How am I to relate to those feelings in this practice? Could you all hear the question? Really important question, isn't it? So in the meditation that we're doing, all such feelings like this are embraced in a space of deep acceptance and care and compassion. And this helps relax any of the self-clinging or woundedness that may be mixed with these feelings. It helps relax the grip of intense self-referential grasping that may also be associated with these feelings, helps that to relax a bit. That self-referential kind of grip in the mind, which contributes to burnout, so that that part of the feeling can relax and begin to heal. At the same time, this space of deep acceptance and compassion provides a space of freedom for motivation, discernment, clarity of mind, courage, energy for action to emerge more and more freely without being so caught up in a kind of a grasping to it all, which takes us into empathic distress, emotional depletion, and burnout. So the practice actually can be very purifying for those feelings in a way that sifts through them so that the energies for taking action can come out more purely, more strongly, less caught up in the ways we tend to also get caught up around those feelings. That becomes sort of deleterious to actually taking the kind of action that we need to take. Indeed, that's how I got into this online course with you. When the pandemic struck, I was sort of feeling not exactly, that wasn't my issue exactly, it was related to that, but it was a sense that people are experiencing these intense feelings, which are contagious. And people really need a way to process those feelings in a healing way that can empower us to take action in all the ways that we have to now. And I just felt, I've got to do something. You following what I'm saying? These practices were not deleting that sense of the urge to take action. It was somehow bringing it out stronger. And then by happy coincidence, the invitation came, oh, John, by the way, we were wondering if you'd like to give an online course for a few weeks. And it was like, it just matched. So yes. So similar, not the same, but similar situation, similar. Okay, so another question is, I'm struggling with the instruction to re-inhabit a caring moment of my life. Okay, I'm struggling with that instruction to re-inhabit a caring moment. I'm having a hard time doing that. So here, what I suggest is, it can take a little time because, in part because of our attachment scripts, which are really ways of talking to ourselves that have gotten established often from our childhood onward, which have also often caused us to dismiss signals of care or not notice many caring moments or ignore them or simply declare that they're not really caring moments. So it may seem at first rather hard to find any. So, but then also when sifting through your experience in your life, and also even earlier today, perhaps somebody was showing you care, or for me, a dog walked by, that's enough to throw me into caring moment mode, but also humans, but something about dogs. A key into this is then look for a caring moment. Notice your attachment scripts. Realize that they are scripts. It's really like an actor's script that we keep saying to ourselves, but they're not necessarily the actual reality. They're just a protective mechanism we learned. But now we need to learn a deeper level of protection. So notice those scripts. By noticing them, you realize that maybe you have a little more freedom here to pay new attention. And as you do, and you sift through your life, or even notice moments in your day, caring moments among others that bring you joy or that you're a part of, really pay attention to them. And then take notice, especially, or recall moments that make you feel happy to recall. You feel a little uplifted to recall, simply to bring that moment to mind. If that's the case, then you are already beginning to experience its loving qualities, its caring qualities. That's why you feel happy to even bring it to mind. This is before re-inhabiting it. I mean, even just to remember it. I mean, even as I'm talking to you, I'm remembering a few of those. It just makes me happy to remember. So if it makes you happy to remember, it feels a little uplifting, it is already doing its job. Those caring qualities, that sense of happiness or being uplifted or joy, it's already here. So then you cannot deny that it's actually connecting you to those caring qualities. It is. It's a matter of noticing more fully. And then imagine that it is really happening now, not just a memory. And you will experience those loving qualities more fully. It's the same for evoking a benefactor. Think of someone that it feels uplifting or inspiring or joyful for you to bring to mind. There are people like that for me. I'll tell you a secret. One of them is Bishop Tutu, Archbishop Desmond Tutu. He came to my university one time when I was a graduate student to give a talk, and I was just mesmerized by the quality of his presence. And so if I just think of him, it's like uplifting. So like that. So maybe there are people like that in your life. It's not even personally meeting him. It's just being there with him or being aware of him on television is enough. Mr. Rogers was like that for many people. See, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, and I bet you'll find a benefactor there, some of you. Another question is, when we have negative thoughts of ourselves, we can say that that is not real, that's just a thought. But how do we know that the positive feelings evoked with a caring moment or benefactor are more real or more true? Did you hear? Is that okay? That's a good question, right? That was not a silly question. That was a good question, okay? So, what to say? We don't have a lot of time, so I'll just say it. When we are hating others or feeling possessive of others or jealous of others, we are not knowing them. We think we are, but we're not. We're not knowing the actual beings there. We are mistaking those other persons for our own limited thought of them. We're mistaking them as only someone worthy of hate. Nothing else there. Someone just to be jealous of. Someone just for me to take possession of. You're mine. We are not knowing them. We think we are, but we're not. Which means that that kind of emotion is out of touch with reality. Sorry, but it is. In the way that I'm talking about now. Because it thinks that it knows them, but it's not knowing them. It's just knowing its own limited image of them. As if that's all they are, just a piece of trash or just someone to be jealous of. So those kinds of destructive thoughts and feelings are out of touch with reality. That's part of the meaning of they are caught up in delusion or ignorance. They are not actually seeing anywhere fully what is there. Love and compassion, on the other hand, genuine love and compassion emerge when we have fuller awareness of others. when we sense more fully what they are and what they are going through. If we do that, then we have love and compassion for them. And in fact, that's a test of how well we're seeing, how fully we are aware. If we are more and more fully aware of what others are and what they are going through, then automatically we have love and compassion for them. And so love and compassion are in touch with reality and are not deluded, and are also closely connected, therefore, to wisdom and discernment. Discerning the difference between our own limited image of others and the actual persons. That's discernment or wisdom. So love and compassion are associated with wisdom. Hatred, possessiveness, jealousy, etc. are delusion. That's why. Sorry, that's just how it is. That's what I have to say about it. If you want to argue with me, I am really happy to have that argument. I've argued that thousands of times with people. I am not going to lose that argument. Okay, sorry. It's going off. Okay, next question. John referred a lot to awareness. Could you say more about what you mean by awareness? For example, awareness of what precisely? Okay, did you hear that? Okay. So what I mean by awareness is the cognizant knowing quality that is present in all of our experiences. I'll repeat that. The cognizant or knowing quality that is present in all of our experiences, and which is undivided from a basic quality of openness. Openness within all of our experiences. So this cognizant open quality that's always present in our experience, whether or not there are any elaborate mental operations happening, or whether or not we are thinking of something in particular, there is always this cognizant open quality to what we are experiencing in our sensations, our perceptions, also in our thoughts, feelings, etc. But whether we are particularly thinking or not particularly thinking about something, this cognizant open quality is always here. It's part of the nature of our experience. So we can learn in the meditations we've been doing at the releasing phase, the last phase, to relax back into the simplicity of the simple openness and cognizance of our mind prior to complex mental operations. In the releasing phase, we're learning to settle back into the simplicity of the openness and cognizance of our mind prior to complex mental operations. And that underlying open cognizant power of mind is endowed with many capacities that have been significantly impeded or held back by our self-clinging, sort of self-defending patterns of mind. So in the releasing phase of each meditation, the last phase, the instruction is helping the mind to learn to relax into the basic open cognizant quality of mind, our basic awareness, where we can begin to access capacities for deepening calm, inner peace, groundedness, ease, simplicity, spaciousness, and capacities for appreciation, joy, care, and compassion. Okay, next question. In the meditations we're learning, I don't understand the releasing phase instruction. I'm unclear what the mental frameworks are that are to be released. So I just went over that releasing phase instruction, but to say a little more, the instruction in the last releasing phase of the meditation says, just relax deeply into this felt sense of love and warmth and acceptance. Let that help your heart and mind to trust, relax, settle, and release all of its images and frameworks, and just become completely open like space. No, I was just starting to do that just by saying it. So in this phase of the meditation, the releasing phase, we're letting, importantly, we're letting this feeling, this felt sense of those loving qualities help the mind to trust the source of those qualities, which is a unity of openness and cognizance beyond self-clinging patterns of thought. So releasing frameworks of mind is experienced kind of like if you have a fist, tight fist, and you just let it gently open completely. So it's experienced like a fist opening, or releasing the narrow, self-gripping sense of self by relaxing into a basic openness beyond it. That's what it's like. The next question, are you saying, John, that human beings are basically loving creatures and that, ordinary life with its disappointments has hardened or impeded our ability to be loving without fear? And if you are saying that, is this practice meant to call forth our basic loving natures despite continued experience of rejection and so forth? And in that case, can we come to a place where those negative influences no longer matter? So in a word, yes. So the practice is taking us to a place where negative experiences matter less, or less personally to us. The reason is because what feels so difficult about negative experience is our feelings. It's not just some abstract concept, oh, I am now having a negative experience, therefore I am very upset. That's not what's making us upset. It's the feelings that we feel when we have a difficult experience. That's what makes us very upset and what we get very caught up in. And this practice is zeroing in on our feelings. If we really follow the instruction, really pay attention to the instruction on the handout or in listening again to these recordings, you can notice that our feelings are the heart of the matter. A space of warmth, acceptance, and compassion is being uncovered, within which our feelings can begin to process themselves by letting them have all the space they need to do so. And that most of us have not known how to do. So please pay attention to that, because that direction can be deeply healing. And as we experience that, as our feelings experience that, and feel the safety of that, it changes everything for us, including how long we have to ruminate in anger or fear of rejection or pain because something happened to us. How long we feel like we have to do that can begin to get reduced, because we're learning a very different way to be with all those feelings. And as we learn that healing way to be with feelings, our lens on others, on ourself, our lens, our perspective on ourself, on others, and on the situation we're in opens. Because our feelings feel safe enough to let us see more, sense more here, including more of what we are. So yes, for more on that, I recommend seeing a book by one of my teachers, Tsogni Rinpoche, a book called Open Heart, Open Mind. And he teaches on this quite a lot, this different way of being with feelings like that I described, that's part of our meditations. So you can find more on that there, Open Heart, Open Mind. Okay, someone's asking, how can I turn my feeling of unworthiness into worthiness? Could you hear that okay? How can I turn my feeling of unworthiness toward worthiness? And how can I be with others who are deeply wounded so that they feel worthy of love and acceptance? And that's exactly the direction we're going in. It involves practice. I don't think the proper response to that is just a conceptual answer. It's a practice, and that's exactly the kind of practice that we're entering into. To turn our feeling of unworthiness into a recognition of our worthiness requires some help. When we experience ourselves as seen as worthy of love and care, it helps us to recognize that in ourselves. And that's a caring moment, or present with the benefactor. It's the experience of being seen. So to be seen as worthy of love and held in love is also what empowers us to see others as worthy of love, no matter what's happening, and hold them in love, which is deeply healing both for ourselves and others. So my response to that question, which is such an important question, is the very practice that I'm introducing. And that's a big part of why I'm introducing it. But again, I did not make it up. This pattern of practice comes from all those spiritual traditions I mentioned earlier and is at the very center of Tibetan Buddhism. Pure perception, Dagnang. Seeing better. Being seen, empowering you to see better. That's the heart of Tibetan Buddhism. So it really comes up prominent in my own background too. When someone says, can you say more about how our basic awareness contains this wellspring of deep, unconditional love and caring? So I already talked about that tonight, but I would only add that the meditations we're doing are providing access to those loving qualities. So we cannot deny that our capacity for those loving qualities, warmth, acceptance, care, openness, spaciousness, that long, long list that you put in your chat box last night, we cannot deny that those capacities are being evoked. So those are capacities of our basic awareness. We can sense the truth of that through the practice. But for a more theoretical background and explanation of how it is that our basic awareness contains all of these capacities, then I would say it'd be good to read my book, Awakening Through Love, because I talk about that a lot in that book, more than I can tonight. And also, again, one of my teacher's books, Tsogni Rinpoche, Open Heart, Open Mind, he talks about that a lot. So you can find that. How does our basic awareness contain this wellspring of unconditional capacities? You can find it in those books, Awakening Through Love and Open Heart, Open Mind. Last question is, could you talk about the relationship between this process we're in and becoming aware of experiencing the conditioned and the unconditioned? Are the waters of the well that you mentioned a brief experience of the unconditioned? Are the attachment scripts that you mentioned examples of the conditioned habits of our heart, body, and mind? So we only have 1 minute left, so I'll say in a minute. So the waters of the well are a metaphor for loving qualities that arise from our underlying awareness. Our changing experience of those qualities is conditioned, impermanent, causal. The essence of those qualities is a unity of emptiness or openness and cognizance, which is unconditioned. Attachment scripts are conditioned habits of mind and body. The loving qualities that we're accessing can become increasingly unconditional because their source is unconditioned. The loving qualities can become more and more unconditional, no matter who you are, what you're doing, what you think you're doing. You have a worth, a dignity that is worthy of care and love. That's unconditional love. Love can become unconditional like that because it's arising from an unconditioned source, which is the unity of openness and cognizance, or emptiness and cognizance, in the deep nature of our minds. So that's a Tibetan Buddhist response. Someone from a different spiritual tradition could give an analogous response, but it would come from a different framework. So that was my response. Okay, we've come to the end of our time. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed being with you. We have another session next Thursday evening that will also be recorded as like this one too. So wonderful to be with you all. Thank you for coming. And I'll see you next Thursday. Thank you.